Okay, so you know how we like reach for a bar of soap, like almost without even thinking about it?
Yeah, totally. It's like second nature, right?
Totally. But it kind of makes you wonder, like, how did people ever get clean before soap was even a thing?
It's a really good question. And honestly, it's a lot more interesting than you might think.
Right. So in this deep dive, we're gonna like dive into the surprisingly soapy history of, well, not always being so squeaky clean.
Yeah, and it's not like they just didn't care about hygiene back then. I mean, take the Indus Valley civilization, for example. They had this thing called the Great Bath in Mohenjo-Daro. It was a whole public bath, super advanced for its time. They were into steam cleaning way before it was cool.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
really interesting. Speaking of water, I did read something about how a historian, I think her name was Judith Ridner, said that back then things probably didn't smell so fresh and clean.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Makes you appreciate that like fresh out of the shower feeling, huh?
For sure.
Yeah.
But okay, so back to soap.
Mm.
How do you think it even like became a thing?
Yeah, like was it one of those sudden inventions or more of a happy accident?
It's actually a lot more about accidental chemistry than you might think. So soap at its heart is a pretty simple combo of alkali and fat. So
Yeah, I mean,
picture this, someone's cleaning a greasy pan with plant ash over a fire,
okay, I'm picturing it.
and bam, they just accidentally made soap. Or imagine someone's boiling animal fats with wood ash, and there you have it, soap again.
Wow, so they were basically cooking up soap without even realizing it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, these practices weren't exactly secret. They were actually super common in places like Babylon and Egypt way back in the day.
So are we talking like everyone was walking around squeaky clean, or did it take a while for them to realize what they had?
It seems like it took a hot minute for them to figure out the full potential of soap and turn it into what we know and love today.
That's wild. Okay, so they had these early methods, but I'm guessing it wasn't like the lavender scented bars we have now.
Definitely not.
So tell me, what kind of stuff were they using before they had all the fancy ingredients?
Well, they were surprisingly resourceful. Think plant ash for alkali date palm oils. Even things like pine cones, believe it or not.
Pine cones? What? How do you even?
I know, right? But it actually makes sense. Crushed up pine cones would have acted like a natural exfoliant, kind of like those apricot scrubs people use nowadays.
Oh, that's pretty clever,
They
actually.
were way ahead of their time. Even without labs and stuff, they were observant and knew how to use nature to their advantage. They understood the basic principles of soap, even without all the scientific jargon we have now. They really were. Like, it kind of makes you think about all the stuff we buy these days.
Right. Like, do we really need 10 different kinds of face wash?
I know. Okay, so we've talked about early soap making and some of the ingredients they used.
Which are pretty out there, by the way.
Totally. But now I kind of want to jump to a different place for a sec.
Yeah.
What about like the Greeks and Romans?
Oh, yeah, they were big on hygiene, weren't they?
Oh, yeah, totally. They were really into cleanliness,
Yeah.
but in a way that might surprise you.
Didn't they use a ton of olive oil or something?
That's the one. So instead of like using soap, they'd rinse off with water and then basically cover themselves in olive oil. Then they'd use this tool called a strigil to scrape it all off, along with any dirt that was stuck to it. It's actually kind of like a spa treatment.
That does sound kind of nice, I'm not gonna lie. But, like, did it actually get them clean?
Well, that's the thing. It was probably more about smelling good than actually getting squeaky clean.
Mm-hmm.
Remember those plant oils we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
They loved adding all sorts of fragrant plant extracts to those oils.
So they were going for, like, a floral scent instead of that clean soap smell? That's pretty similar to how we use perfume and stuff today.
Exactly. It's funny how some things never really change. But here's the really interesting part. Even though they had these early forms of soap and all these rituals, it took a surprisingly long time for soap, as we know it, to really catch on.
Really? How come?
Well, a bunch of things happened all at once. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, which meant they could mass produce stuff like never before.
So soap became way more accessible.
Exactly. And on top of that, fats, which are a key ingredient in soap, became way cheaper. And then you had all these public health campaigns popping up. People were starting to understand that being clean could actually help prevent diseases.
It's kind of amazing when you think about how our ideas about hygiene have like totally changed over time.
Yeah, it really makes you appreciate that we've come a long way.
For sure. And who knew that something as simple as soap had such a wild history? It really makes you wonder what other everyday things have these crazy backstories that we don't even know about.
Right. It's like the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. It's pretty humbling, actually.
Totally. So the next time you're like sudsing up in the shower, take a second to think about all the random events and discoveries that led to that moment.
It's a trip for sure. From ancient civilizations to accidental chemistry to the Industrial Revolution, it's all connected.
Well said. And that wraps up our deep dive into the surprisingly soapy history of hygiene.
Until next time.